Welcome back to Unraveling the Brain. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Madsen. Today, we get the great pleasure of chatting with Dr. Ashley about diet, autism, and for all you that don't know, Dr. Ashley runs our functional medicine program. She looks over pretty much everyone's labs that comes in here, gives recommendations off of that. So we're going to talk about that fun subject of diet and, with all the challenges related to autism and what we typically see in the labs and how we can start addressing them and just giving way more specific care for these kids. So let's jump into it. Okay, well, let's just start with let's start general and then let's get specific. So let's talk about just general dietary stuff, whether it's in the research, whether it's just in general. What's that? There's so much on the internet. Parents usually don't know where to go, but what's kind of some easy things that they can start doing now? What's a most ideal diet, which obviously a lot of these kids can't get to an ideal diet because of so many restrictions and whatnot. But let's talk about what the research says and let's talk about what we like to see in kids.
Yeah. So as a general rule of thumb, we typically recommend a gluten-free, dairy-free diet when it comes to kids with autism, as well as most kids with developmental delays. And I mean, there's so many things out there, whether it's keto, vegetarian,
Paleo,
paleo.
autoimmune,
Yeah,
low carb, high carb.
yeah. So there's so many different fads, things that people hear on the internet. And what we notice anecdotally as well makes a huge difference, right? There's so much research that shows that autistic symptoms are a lot lower when kids remove things like dairy and gluten.
Yep. And also to go on top of that would be like dyes, processed foods, all the things we know that aren't healthy for us. This episode is sponsored by Infinity Method for Parents. Hey guys, I am super excited to offer this parents coaching course. I'm going to teach you how to assess your child, actually neurologically. So that way you're not asking the question, well, why is my kid not speaking? Or why is my kid not walking? You'll know why they're not speaking or why they're not walking because you'll know how to assess their underlying developmental neurology. You'll know, well, they're not walking because they don't have the foundational motor skills developed because they still have primitive reflexes. They still have balance issues. They still have eye tracking issues. And if those systems aren't developed, they can't do that. So I'm gonna teach you how to assess all those things in your own child. And then I'm gonna teach you how to rehab it. I'm gonna teach you what you need to look for in labs, what things you should be pushing towards with other providers that I've seen to be beneficial for literally thousands of kids. So this course is for parents that really want to make a change. That means putting time aside in your calendar. That means willing to change diet. That means willing to add supplementation in. That means willing to do exercise on a daily basis. And that means also willing to invest financially in your child's long-term development. If I tell you, hey, I want you to make a dietary change, it's not, oh, well, I can't do that for this reason. It's, okay, well, let's figure out how to do it. Those are the parents that help their kids develop really, really well, is the ones that are willing to make changes and figure it out. The ones that are going to make excuses, they won't get results here. Do not join this course if you're going to make excuses, because I don't want you to waste your time. I don't want you to waste your money. And with the methodologies we use, we need that consistency. If you're interested, jump in, sign up now, and I'm going to give you access to all of my other courses. And then we get a couple lives every single month where we're going to walk through all these things. I'm going to teach you how to do all these things and really help your kid to mature and develop and grow. And it's going to be a super fun year.
Yeah. We had a patient on the podcast here like last week who was referencing how her daughter only ate 3 things, and that was dairy, cheese, gluten crackers, and I think maybe fruit juices. And I know a lot of families can feel like they are already really restricted, and that can be really hard, especially when you say, okay, now I need you to go gluten-free, dairy-free.
Yeah. Well, what am I going to feed my kid?
Yeah. And that lovely mom talked about how she felt that and she removed those foods and it actually opened up so much for her kid where it's to the point where her kid's eating kale.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think going off of that point is like a lot of people don't realize that when we eat it, if we have a leaky gut, if we eat gluten, our body releases glutenomorphine, like we're literally, they're addicted to morphine. And same with casein, casenomorphine. So they become truly addicted to the morphine that ends up happening in their body from those foods.
Yeah. It's so addicting. So removing that and allowing their brain, their gut, all of those things to heal Like, the improvements that you see from that alone and, kids trying new foods once you break those habits is so, so important that's, like, step 1, right?
Yeah.
Can we remove the dyes? Can we remove the processed foods? And then can we get them off of gluten and dairy?
And those I always tell parents, like, those first 2 weeks gonna be a behavioral nightmare. Like, they just
Mhm.
re they're not getting that hit of morphine, so then weirdly enough, they're kinda like an addict where they're trying to search for that any way they can, and we
Mhm.
have big behavioral dysregulation, but once you get through it, everything's so much easier. And what would you recommend for during that transition period? Like, what are maybe some easy steps that they could take to, obviously, as we remove that, what are some other foods that they could put in place that is gonna give them the appropriate nutrients and that a lot of kids with autism eat?
Yeah. So, first thing would be finding similar things. So, if your kid only eats crackers, well, can you at least find a gluten-free cracker? That's just step 1 of can we just at least break that piece? And then when it comes to, okay, let's say they eat 5 fruits, an apple, a banana, blueberries, whatever it is. Well, then can we find fruits that are very similar to those? Like instead of an apple, can we do a pear? Or instead of blueberries, can we do maybe raspberries? Things that kind of have either similar textures or a similar um,
Look, shape.
flavors, shapes, all of those things that kind of seem safe to the child, and then slowly expanding their palate, expanding their microbiome, right?
Yep.
And as we're increasing their microbiome, well, then their inflammation goes down, their bacteria in their gut is a lot more healthy, they have less dysbiosis, all of those things that kind of come with it.
Yeah, and something interesting from, like, a protein aspect, we obviously we look at oats and all those tests, and we see protein being low on these kids a ton, and one thing that it's interesting, most kids will eat bacon, like, and so, like, hey, well, give them bacon, like, give them those aspects that are good solid proteins, good fats,
Mhm.
and then we can build upon that, like, well, as they
Yeah.
get more stomach acid, as they get those things starting to build up, then they will usually start eating more different things, but
Mhm.
not producing enough stomach acid, they're not gonna break anything down, and we're gonna see issues like yeast that we're gonna talk about here too, but, what else? What are some other things?
Yeah, so I would say that's a really great place to start. And then also just allowing your kid to explore with different shapes and making food kind of fun in that aspect as well is just another great tip for parents that may feel like it's kind of limited at the start.
Yeah.
Smoothies are another great way. If you can get things in smoothie form and just throw a bunch of different vegetables in there and get their nutrients in, that's great. Throw the protein powders in there, throw things that are hitting their big macronutrients as well. That's awesome.
Yeah, and, we know that it's very hard for a kid to make those changes, and, like, it's hard for the parent to make those changes. We
Mhm,
understand those concepts, right? Like,
mhm,
we see that every day, but, like, and I often just explain to the parent of, like, you can choose what battle you kinda wanna face. Do you wanna
mhm,
face the battle of very hard to change their diet, or do you wanna face the battle of all the subsequent symptomatology that comes from that? The behavioral
mhm.
dysregulation, the lack of development, and choosing what your battle is gonna be, and if we can start to address this battle and really focus on getting that under control, a lot of these other symptoms start going away and life becomes a lot easier.
Absolutely. Yeah, we see those kids that have dysregulated nervous systems, right? And their cortisol is through the roof. So what happens when your cortisol is high? What do you want?
Sure.
Sugar, carbs,
Yep.
anything that kind of gives you that dopamine reward system. And then it's that vicious loop, right?
Yep.
So trying to break that cycle, getting them into parasympathetic state, allowing their body to get good healthy fats and just breaking that cycle.
Yeah, yeah, calming that. You get starting to switch over to a better fuel source of fats versus straight sugar constantly.
Yeah.
Um, let's get into labs because we obviously we look at tons and tons and tons and tons of labs, but
Mhm.
what are the biggest deficiencies from like a macronutrient, micronutrient that you see? What are the biggest, infections or maybe it's gut infections, heavy metals,
Mm.
environmental toxicities? Let's kind of run down the gamut of that.
Yeah, if you're able to get a basic blood panel on a child, that's a great place to start. If they are iron deficient, right, their body is gonna be not absorbing nutrients well, they're not getting enough blood flow to all these organs in their system. So, if you can get a basic blood panel on your child, that's a great place to start.
How many of these kids we see are anemic or have
Yeah.
thyroid issues or have
Yes.
celiacs or it's crazy how many of them.
Exactly, and no one ever runs that, and that's so frustrating. Obviously, there are circumstances where, some kids just can't or they have to be put under, and I understand that, and that's where a lot of these urine, stool tests, all of these things are really great options for parents
Yep.
because they're not invasive.
Right.
You don't have to put your kid down to get good quality information on a
Yeah.
child.
And I would just say, to go off of that, I feel like when we send kids to like LabCorp where that's their only job is to draw blood like 60 times a
They're
day,
great.
they're awesome. I feel like they almost always are able to get a blood draw done. So I don't know what they do, but like places like that where they are doing that constantly is a so much better place for them to go to than like maybe a pediatrician's office that's doing 10 of them a day or 5 of them a day or something
Mhm.
like that. So
Yeah,
they're just
exactly.
really good at it.
They are
So
good.
just FYI.
Yeah. So I would say that's a great first place to start. And then from there, I mean, as well as I, there's so many things on the internet of take this supplement, take this
Mhm.
supplement. This is a magic thing for my child. You should try it. And that's not always the case. Like zeolite is a
100%.
great example of that.
Yeah.
For viewers who don't know what zeolite is, it's a more natural detox remedy for kids that kind of is targeted towards more heavy metal
Yep.
detox. Um, but that might not be the case for your child
Yeah,
just
maybe they don't
because,
have any heavy metal toxicities.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we see a lot of fungal infections. So, right there would be an example of if your kid tries zeolite and it's not working, well, maybe they have a fungal infection.
Yeah.
So doing a urine, organic acid test to just seeing if they have any fungal infections that are inhibiting their mitochondrial function.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
high oxalates are producing chronic inflammation, and again, there's another aspect where you can change the diet and completely change their world.
yeah, absolutely. What else? We see a ton of, yeah, mold infections. So does your child live in a home that has water damage, and are they constantly being exposed to that? Do they have genetic susceptibility that makes them less able to detox that mold? Those are things that, I mean, you need to work with a provider to figure out what's the case for your kid,
Yeah.
not just the kid that it worked for on the internet, but
Yep.
what is it specifically for your child?
Yep. And like just easily running like a total toxic burden. It's a urine test. We can look at, and urine's not the absolute best way to look for heavy metals by any means. Like, there's other ways to do that. But the nice thing about that test is like you can look at mycotoxins, you can look at environmental toxins and heavy metals in one test, which is
Mhm.
like, and it's easy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So
it's not invasive for the kid at
yeah.
all.
And so then you can find out, do they truly have heavy metals or do they have environmental toxicities? Do they have mold toxicities? And then you can address it actually appropriately versus
Mhm.
just like, my kid probably has parasites. My kid probably has yeast. Like, and you can get way more specific with protocols there.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's so much research around kids with autism not having enough stomach acid to actually break down their foods or not having enough enzymes to break down their food. And a stool test, that'll show it right there of
Yep.
are they even breaking down their foods? You can give all the vitamins in the world, but if the kid doesn't have enough stomach acid to break that down, well, then it's a waste.
Yeah. You're just spending money that's going out the other end, not getting absorbed.
Yeah.
And the like just to go off of that, when we have that, like when we eat highly processed foods, we eat a lot of carbohydrates, we don't eat enough protein, we just won't produce stomach acid. And so like again, that comes back to first and foremost just the diet of getting more proteins that they need to break down and even helping with digestive enzymes and things along those lines. But yeah,
Mhm.
a stool sample will tell you that. It'll tell you if they have yeast, bacterial overgrowth, parasites.
Mhm.
And again, like these tests we're talking about, they're not cheap, but, like, you can run all of them for a couple grand, and you can learn more about your kid than
Yeah.
you'll ever you ever know. Like, I mean, it's crazy how much stuff comes up on these tests that could have easily been addressed over a period of time with diet and lifestyle and supplementation or herbal different herbal aspect or even medications if needed, but
Mhm.
they just never get ran.
Yeah, and all the money that you could be saving from all the supplements that you're buying, trying to make something stick. I
Yeah,
mean, knowing what the problem is so important.
100%. Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, how much time is wasted or how many years go by that,
Mhm.
like, that $2,500 investment or whatever it is based on how many labs you ran is
Yeah,
like,
huge.
oh, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'd pay that over and over and over again to get the results that you see in those tests and the changes that you see once you start implementing strategies based off of that.
Yeah, I mean, the clock is ticking from a developmental aspect of your child. You go an extra month without the appropriate nutrients to the brain, well, that's a whole month of development that your kid
Yeah.
lost.
Yeah, and if like, I mean, we can talk about this pretty easy of, like, the reason why these brains aren't developing is because typically they don't have enough energy, they don't have enough mitochondrial function, they don't have enough nutrients, they have too much toxic stress,
Mhm.
and if we can address that mechanism, now we can start seeing that develop, now we can start implementing strategies to help that to develop. But yeah, like, in those first few years, I mean, the brain is maturing at such a fast rate, if we can take advantage of that,
Mhm.
I mean, every day counts, let alone every month or
Yeah.
year counts even more, so
Even, a food sensitivity test as well. I mean, when we look at,
yep.
neural zoomer is the best test that you can ever run when it
So
comes to a neurological kid who is dealing with neurological problems, right?
yep.
So it looks at all this brain autoimmunity, brain inflammation markers, and there it can even say if there are foods that may cross-react with certain structures of the brain,
Yeah.
and that's so important because,
Yeah.
again, when we talk about that anti-Purkinje cell or anti-cerebellum marker
Yeah.
and a kid's eating gluten and they have cerebellar findings.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna and for people that don't quite understand that, there's something called molecular mimicry where proteins of a food look a lot like the brain. So then when that protein gets through your digestive system into your bloodstream, your immune system has to go and get rid of it. But then what's happened is that we're developing antibodies against that also cross-react with our brain and create inflammation. But we can pick that up on a neural zoomer.
Mhm.
And like so if your kid has balance and coordination issues and movement issues, like, a lot of times that's coming from the cerebellum, which gluten can cross-react with that, or a thyroid issue can cross-react with that. And then, like, if a kid has stimming or chronic, stereotypies or tics or movement disorders, that can be coming from the basal ganglia, and, like, dairy can cross-react with dopamine 2 receptor
Mhm.
antibodies, antitubulin, like, all these different structures in that area, and a lot of times I don't wanna say it's as simple, but a lot of times removing those foods takes a massive stress off the brain and allows it to start to mature again.
Yeah, we've seen kids with motor tics or vocal tics, and all of a sudden we remove a food, and it's as simple as that.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's always that case,
right. But
but
sometimes it is.
sometimes it is. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, test is awesome. That's by far my favorite. If you have a kid that has developmental challenges, running a neural zoomer is one of the best investments I'll be ever make to figure stuff out.
Yeah, I agree. Looks at all different perspectives as to why they may have brain inflammation, right? Looks at
Yep.
blood sugar dysregulation, looks at trauma to the brain, it looks at infections, right? People don't realize, like, we could do a whole podcast on PANS
Oh
pandas.
gosh.
But PANS pandas is a prime example of an infection creating inflammation within the brain and the immune system getting revved up and attacking brain structures versus the actual virus or bacteria itself.
Yeah. Yeah. So for like kids that have these developmental delays, labs are never like 100% accurate, but they give us indications, right? And if we have symptoms that are consistent with those lab markers, it makes sense to work on those. But we can look at everything from brain all the way through gut, through mitochondrial function to energy production to how
Mhm,
we're breaking down foods. And to be honest, all of those things need to be looked at in a child that has autism because
mhm.
there's going to be so many different aspects that come up that can be worked on to get progress for that kid.
Yeah, better function.
Yeah, and I would say, like, even starting out 6, 7 years ago doing this, like, I might have ran one of those tests, and I missed out on the other 80% of things I coulda looked at because I didn't know. And that's the same with, like, if you go and ask your provider that's down the street, they're probably not gonna know what these tests are. But
Mhm,
we know what they are because this is what we research, this is what we dig into, and these are the kids we see every day. So,
mhm.
looking at the whole spectrum of of testing to figure out what's going on throughout the entire body is vital. And the more different things they figure out and the more changes they make for that,
Mhm.
the better and better and better and better results get.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. Well, thanks for your time today. I
Yeah.
appreciate it. We'll talk more. We're going to have lots more conversations on this. We're going to have a lot more talking about funk med stuff we can do, different cases. So we're really excited to start doing that and look for the next one. See you guys later.